facing our nation, the worst period of long-term unemployment on record. The most recent job numbers, as we're shown on the chart here, told us that 43% of the unemployed were long-term, meaning out of the workforce 27 weeks or longer. The small drop in the unemployment rate from 9% to 8.6% was largely attributable to almost 500,000 Americans giving up their search for employment entirely. The most helpful thing we as a Congress can do, I think, is to help foster an environment that encourages job creation. The Bureau of Labor Statistics data proves this point. We have 13.3 million unemployed Americans seeking work and 2.6 million who want to work but have given up the job search. Yet we have just 3.4 million job openings. Unfortunately, the solutions being presented here today fail to acknowledge that the biggest barrier to getting a job for most unemployed people is the lack of jobs available. Instead, we're going to discuss misguided legislation that will actually discourage new hiring and harm long-term unemployed individuals the worst. I'm certainly glad to have this opportunity to explain the negative consequences that will arise from the proposed Fair Employment Opportunity Act, but I also would like to speak about the real solutions we have at hand to address unemployment. The truth is that we have several opportunities to allow private job sector creation to dramatically increase, which the current administration is blocking. Unemployed Americans should know that decisions by President Obama are directly preventing the creation of thousands of new, well-paying private sector jobs in projects widely supported by labor unions, and that these jobs could be created without raising taxes or increasing our crushing national debt by another dime. While it is clear that the historic drop in job creation over the last 3 years is the biggest barrier facing the unemployed Americans, I will set that aside and address some of the other barriers they face. One that I've worked on to address for many years is the need for more targeted job training. Individuals who stay out of the workforce for longer periods of time often have skills that do not match the current job openings in their area. The longer they stay out, the more likely they may face skill deterioration. My colleagues know that I strongly believe we must do more to improve federal job training programs. For the past several Congresses, one of my major priorities has been updating and upgrading the Workforce Investment Act. This year I spent countless hours negotiating this legislation with colleagues on this committee. It's hard to imagine a bill more appropriate for these difficult economic times. However, once again, I was disappointed the bill was not brought to markup. In past Congresses, similar bills have received unanimous support in both the Help Committee, which has reported it out twice, and the full Senate, which has passed it twice. If you really want to do something to address a barrier to reemployment, pass the WIA reauthorization. The Workforce Investment System provides employment, job training, and education services to over 9 million people a year. The WIA reauthorization bill remains a casualty of Congress's inability to overcome its worst partisan instincts. The bill, which I've been negotiating with Senator Murray, Senator Isaacson, Senator Harkin, and others, would specifically improve coordination of job training services for unemployment recipients in 6 important ways. For example, it would require that all unemployment insurance recipients get referrals to and application assistance for training and education resources and programs, including federal Pell Grants and WIA training and education programs. For unemployed workers struggling to gain the skills they need to land a good job, the bill would be a lifesaver. The sustained economic recession we've faced the past 3 years has put a severe strain on American families and government safety net systems. With over 20 million Americans drawing expanded benefits over the last year, 30 states have depleted their unemployment insurance funds and begun to borrow from the federal government. More states are on their way to borrowing. The worst part is that repayment will require raising payroll taxes in most cases, which is a direct job killer. This crisis has to be addressed. Unfortunately, some of the solutions that have been proposed are neither helpful nor necessary and will benefit trial lawyers more than unemployed Americans. The Fair Employment Opportunity Act is an example of this. This bill responds to the concern that a primary reason for the most extended period of long-term unemployment on record is discrimination. The allegation is that employers refuse to hire unemployed people and discriminate against them. The basis for this allegation is purely anecdotal evidence. There's no empirical support for it whatsoever. I used to own a shoe store with my wife, and as a former employer, I can tell you that there are just as many reasons to hire someone without a current job as there are to hire someone with one. It's easier to hire someone not currently employed. A person without an existing commitment can start work immediately, and the employee may be less costly to employ since there will be no question of matching previous salary and benefits. This straw man of discrimination is based upon employment ads that state that some level of current employment or experience is required. The practice is being exaggerated in almost every respect, and the medicine would do more harm than the disease. First, let me note that the job ad language in question is far from widespread. The number of so-called discriminatory ads makes up a very small percentage of all ads posted. The study cited here today reviewed over 1 million job advertisements from 4 online sites within a 4-week period and only found 150 violations. An analysis of one online job site found 1 in 10,000, or 1/100th of 1%, of their ads included such language. Further, the language itself does not establish any proof of discrimination. Indeed, many of the ads cited as evidence in these reports are seeking employees with up-to-date skills and valid certification in highly technical industries such as nursing. It should not be surprising that a hospital would want to hire someone as a nurse who was indeed legally qualified to be a nurse. Against this straw man, the Fair Opportunity Act would erect costly legal liabilities that will discourage new job creation. This bill would actually harm the long-term unemployed who may not have the kind of network contacts their cohorts had to find a job, because any reasonable employer will consider looking to his own network of employees, friends, and family to fill open positions, rather than opening themselves to a lawsuit by placing a help wanted ad. The mere placement of an ad, even without any language regarding employment status, could be the basis of a lawsuit from as many unemployed individuals as could have conceivably seen the ad. It would then be the burden of the employer or employment agency to prove that he did not take employment status into account when making the decision of who to consider and hire. Small businesses of 15 or more employees would be subject to these lawsuits, and they'd find them costly to defend, with the threat of daily damages of $1,000 a day per violation, plus interest, punitive damages, and injunctive relief. Small employers facing large class action lawsuits would feel pressured to settle. There's no doubt this bill would create a profitable new field for plaintiff attorneys, but it will be to the detriment of unemployed Americans. I hope we can set this misguided legislation aside and talk today about real solutions for Americans who have been unemployed for too long. Without raising taxes or increasing our crushing national debt for another dime, we could add thousands of new, well-paying private sector jobs that will get the economy going again. I'm referring to the Keystone XL pipeline, a project that President Obama halted last month in response to concerns from a few environmental groups. This project would create 20,000 new jobs immediately that will grow to more than 500,000 U.S. jobs. These staggering numbers show why 5 major unions and their Canadian affiliates have stated strong support for the project. With the Chairman's consent, I'll place their statement in the record. The Keystone Pipeline will also create energy security that lessens our dependence on unfriendly nations. Estimates indicate that it will bring in $138.4 million in annual property taxes for state and local governments and $6.5 billion in personal income for American workers. This massive private sector job creator is simply a win-win for Americans, but it isn't happening because the White House has decided to step in and delay the project until the next election. This is a very clear case of the administration erecting an unnecessary and political barrier to private sector job creation. Americans deserve an administration that will lead us out of this dismal period of long unemployment, not erect barriers to sustain it. I look forward to the testimony of Mr. John Meyer, who came here today from Winner, South Dakota, to discuss how his small business and entire community will grow if the Keystone Pipeline were allowed to move forward. And I know he's on a little bit of a time constraint because he's also the Santa Claus for his community and has to get back to fill that role. Some of the other barriers the administration has erected include the crushing moratorium on oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, the slow walking and denial of mine permits, the anti-employment incentives imposed by mandates in the new health care law, the burden of thousands of pages of new regulation making employers uncertain of their ability to survive, and the labor law persecution of those bold enough to expand in non-right-to-work states. Even attempts to encourage private sector job creation have become politicized examples of crony capitalism and poor investments, such as $535 million of taxpayers and that Celenda has made. Taken together, the negative mood of the country is easy to understand. I hope we can serve the American people well today by discussing real solutions to high unemployment. I look forward to hearing the testimony of all of the witnesses, and thank you for your presence today. Yield the floor.
Thank you, Senator Enzi. We'll now turn to our panel. We'll go from left to right. Christine Owens is the Executive Director of the National Employment Law Project.